Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 137 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
I'm good, man. How about you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
I'm excited, as always, to record an episode. It's the fun part for us. We love it. Let's go ahead and give our new Patreon supporter shout-outs.
All right.
We had Byron Wickington.
Hey, Wickington.
Anna Paglia.
Hey, Anna.
Elaine Fiorina.
Ooh, Fiorina.
Mandy Tucker.
What's up, Mandy?
Julie Calvadas.
Calvadas.
David Andrews.
Hey, David.
Anna Bega.
Anna Bega.
Mhm.
Sounds like Winnebago.
Except that's Winnebago.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, sounds just like
Yeah.
Haley Kotke.
She's so cocky.
Christina Cisneros.
Cisneros?
No matter how you say it, I'm going to say no. Chelsea Cardokas.
Cardocus.
Kristen Woodall Rafaco.
Gotta be careful with that last
You
name.
do have to be careful with that one.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah.
Kim R.
Hey, Kim.
Winnie Drews.
Hey, Winnie.
Wendy Schomburg.
What's up, Wendy?
Elizabeth Gunaka.
Ooh, Kanaka.
Julie Collins.
Hey, Julie.
Brianna Gomez.
Hey, Brianna.
Shelley Dean.
What's up, Shelly?
Norel.
Just Norel? Like the razor?
That's a razor?
Sure. It's an electronic device.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what we're going with.
Not familiar with it, but
All right.
J. Oz B. Ander S. I know that's weird. It was put in there kind of strange. I didn't really understand exactly what it means, but I read it the way it's in
I
there.
was going to say, hey, Jay.
Yeah, it's Jay. Christian Jensen.
Hey, Christian.
Elizabeth Scott.
Elizabeth.
And Rebecca Miller.
What's up, Rebecca?
So we appreciate all that new support. And then if we go back into the vault, Gibbs, this week we selected Robert LP.
Hey, Robert.
So appreciate the long-term support as well. We had PayPal, Patrick Martins,
Patrick.
Stephen Kessler,
What's up, Steven?
Cheyenne Robinson,
Ooh, I like that name, Cheyenne.
and Pauline Timms.
Hey, Pauline.
So appreciate it all. Gibbs, right now we have a True Crime All the Time out. We're talking about Suzanne Basso.
Disturbing.
She was a disturbed individual, for sure, to prey on a mentally impaired man, right? Suzanne was a con artist. She reeled this man in, Buddy Musso, and essentially enlisted 5 other people to help her murder this guy to get her hands on his money.
She was a asshole.
She was that. But the details of what they did to this guy, they're horrific. I can't stress that enough. But make sure you check out the episode. Also check out our new podcast, The Reviews Are In. In the next episode, the one that's coming out Tuesday, we're talking about the ostrich travel pillow. This is like no travel pillow you've ever seen.
It's different.
It is so different. And we're talking about some fake fat.
Fake fat?
Fake fat.
I got a lot of fake fat recently on me.
Unfortunately, mine is real. It's all too real.
Oh, maybe I have real fat.
I wish mine was fake that I could remove.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
We're talking about 2 different cases in this episode. We've done that a little bit recently, partly because some of the cases we find interesting, but there's not enough information out there to carry a full episode.
Right.
So we have to package a couple together. They're not always related.
No.
And that's the case in this episode. But we're talking about some unsolved murders at a VA hospital in Ann Arbor, Michigan. This goes back to 1975. And we'll talk about the unsolved murder of 18-year-old James Adamski of Cheektowaga, New York. New York has some very fascinating city names.
They do, man.
And Oklahoma, New York and Oklahoma. I mean, all states do, but of the cases that we've done, it's really New York and Oklahoma that jump out at me.
Yeah.
Of having the most interesting city names. And also some of the most hard to pronounce city names, some that I mess up a lot.
And you're here about all of them.
Yeah. Well, I think actually in this episode, we have a voicemail about a city in New York that I butchered recently. So let's jump right into these unsolved murders at the Veterans Administration Hospital in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It was 1975 when some very disturbing and suspicious respiratory attacks and deaths began to happen at the local VA hospital. This was during the summer. For 6 consecutive weeks, the hospital during that time had 11 patients die, 24 that they were able to save, but they barely escaped death.
Yeah, very close.
At one point, Gibbs, 3 patients had respiratory issues within a 22-minute time frame.
I mean, it's very suspicious. That's a lot of activity in a short period of time.
It is. I mean, you're going to have issues, right? At any hospital. People are going to go into cardiac arrest. People are going to have respiratory attacks or issues. And unfortunately, some people are going to die. But the rate at which specifically people were having these respiratory issues and the number of close calls and the number of deaths, very suspicious.
Yeah, and it's going to be that suspicion that we're talking about that's going to get the whole respiratory department, team, group, whatever you want to call it, on high alert.
So you mentioned it, Gibbs. Suspicion began to fall on the respiratory team at the hospital because these patients were fine 1 minute, and then suddenly they were about to die, as though they just could not breathe at all. There was a sense of terror that hit the hospital during this time period as the weeks progressed and the hospital saw more and more cases like this. We mentioned it. They weren't always able to save each person's life, and patients began dying.
And you know, when that happens, it's going to grab more attention than just your respiratory department, right? Now there's going to be reports that have to be filed. There's going to be family members that have to be told what happened.
Well, you have the hospital administration who is looking at what had to be an unbelievable spike in these type of respiratory attacks, and especially a spike in deaths. It's going to hit everyone's radar.
Yeah.
From the administration, chief of staffs, people like that. The head of the anesthesiology department started looking into some of these cases of both deaths and near deaths. They were analyzing what could have possibly been done. I mean, I think what was really clouding everything with a lot of these cases was that it seemed as though the patients were alone in their rooms, they were resting, and then all of a sudden they're in full-blown near-death mode.
Yeah, they were immediately going into respiratory distress. And why was that? Nobody knew.
Well, I think that's what they were looking into. They wondered if it could have been faulty equipment. They checked into that. But I think in the back of some people's minds, they had to be thinking, is there someone that is purposefully causing this to happen?
Yeah.
To these patients.
I mean, I think you run down the whole checklist, right? Was it human error? Did somebody give something to somebody, the wrong medicine that had a side effect? Or is somebody doing this, like you said, on purpose?
When you run down that list, faulty equipment, well, that's pretty easy to check. I also think that probably would not account for the numbers that we're talking about.
Yeah, the volume.
The volume. And then when you talk about human error, I would say the same thing. Yeah, human error occurs. We know it does.
Right.
But it's not going to result in the numbers that we're talking about.
30-some cases. Yeah,
cases. So pretty naturally, at some point, you have to think somebody is doing something purposefully to cause these things to happen. They determined it wasn't the equipment. I think they figured out that, this was not someone prescribing the wrong medicine, giving the wrong doses on accident. That's not the case.
No, but they needed to know what was causing this. And the only way that they could figure this out is that they needed to get the lab involved. And so that's exactly what they did. The head of the department got with the lab, and they took samples from the victims.
So they have the samples. They began to do the lab work on those samples. And I think pretty quickly, Gibbs, they determined that the victims, both the ones that lived and the ones that died, had been given a drug called Pavulon. This is a synthetic drug of the toxin that is used in like blow darts, found in some tribal communities of South America back in the day. The toxin causes muscle paralysis, including the muscles that allow you to breathe. So that's a problem.
It's a big problem.
Once the hospital figured this out, they knew they had a huge issue. And very quickly, they called in the FBI for assistance. The FBI came in, they started a very intense investigation, and they confirmed the hospital's finding that this powerful muscle relaxant Pavulon was injected into the patients, most likely through their IV lines. So now their investigation had to focus on, okay, who had the ability to get these drugs and who had the ability to give them to the patients.
Makes you wonder how accessible patients are to anybody when they're in the hospital. So could anybody come off the street and do this? You know, if you were in the hospital, could I just walk up into your room and inject this into your IV?
Well, so we're talking 1975. But even in 2019, if you had a syringe filled with something,
yeah,
and I was in the hospital with an IV in,
right,
and let's say I was asleep, technically you could walk into my room, push that into the IV line, whatever it was, and that would go into my system. It's a scary thought.
You're right. And you would think in today's world, it would be a little higher level of security.
Well, and I think there is compared to 1975.
I think so.
But you don't have an armed guard standing by every patient's bed monitoring who comes in and who comes out.
Even with them not allowing you to go back to certain rooms without certain passes, you can still circumvent it, right? I mean, you can at least, I mean, I have spent a few days in the hospital recently, and I can tell you when they say only so many people back at a time, all you have to do is wait by the door that they push the little button.
And just go in.
And just go in.
When somebody opens the door.
Yeah, and you're back there. So you want back there bad enough, you're fine away.
Well, I think, like I said, I think it's a scary proposition. Yeah. Anytime that you are in a situation like that where maybe you're out of it. Maybe you are on some heavy painkillers, medication, you're out of it that way. Yeah. Or you're just asleep. The issue is you have this IV.
Right.
And it's very easy. You see the nurses do it. They come in, or doctors, they come in, they put something into that one port, depress the plunger, and whatever that is goes into your IV, into your system.
And for me and you, we hope it's morphine.
Morphine. I always hope for morphine. I ask for it. Yeah. They're not always obliging, which, puts a frown on my face.
And then my dentist is like, you're just here for a dental cleaning. Why are you asking for morphine from a dentist? I'm like,
you're like, why are you asking so many questions? Yeah. Just let go of the morphine.
Hook me up, dude.
The FBI stated that once they got on site and all of this started to come to light, right? The deaths, the near-death experience of some of these patients, all of that started to come out. There was not another occurrence of this same type of issue. So that tells you something. This wasn't just a high incidence of people that were having respiratory issues.
Right.
This was an outside influence for sure.
Yeah. The suspect said, hey, this is getting real now. The FBI is here.
Yeah. They stopped doing whatever it is they were doing because they didn't want to get caught. This was an intense investigation by the FBI. It was lengthy. It was an expensive investigation. They had to interview medical staff. They interviewed patients and even vendors. So this VA hospital had close to 800 staff members alone. That's a lot of interviews.
That's a lot, man. That's going to take a considerable amount of time to get through all that, to digest all that, and then try to analyze
and make sense of it.
Yeah.
I think it does give you a sense of why the investigation took as long as it did. But when the FBI made their final determination, it was that most likely someone on the hospital staff had to have been involved in these attacks. The FBI laid out a time frame detailing when they felt that the suspect or suspects could have actually administered the drugs and not been detected by other staff members. So again, a lot of work, right? To go through timelines of when people are in certain rooms, shift changes, all of that. The other thing that the FBI determined was that whoever did this had to have a good understanding of this drug, had to know how quickly this drug would paralyze the victims.
And I think that's important because, the suspect or suspects that are doing this, they need to know how much time they have before it starts to take effect and for them to get out of the room so no one can detect who they were and when they were doing this.
And the FBI figured out that it was about 5 minutes from the time that whoever was doing this injected the patients to the time that they went into some sort of respiratory arrest. So they began reviewing timesheets, patient logs, and through that, the FBI narrowed things down to one specific ICU nurse. This was a female nurse that had recently immigrated from the Philippines. Her name was Filipina Narciso. And the FBI could show that she was the only one on duty for all of the injections. And one patient recalled seeing her inject something into his IV just prior to his attack. So she very quickly became the main person of interest, and it caused the FBI to focus in on her activities over this period of time.
I think it's amazing that they were able to get to this point, all those people they had to investigate, the timelines behind it, and to finally get to a spot where you can basically call out one individual.
So it's not like it is in an hour TV show, right? I think everybody knows that.
Right.
There is so much legwork involved in some of these investigations. Now, some of them come together very quickly, but we're kind of spoiled, I think, by some of the television shows. It makes it seem like, boom, they hit on this nugget and they found the perpetrator, because we got to wrap this up in an hour because, I got to watch Jimmy Kimmel and then go to bed.
Right. Yeah.
But in real life, we know it doesn't happen like that. It can take weeks, months, even years.
Yeah, they don't show all the dead ends that they run into or they have to circle back.
Exactly. But the thing is, as the FBI was looking into Filipina, they thought that it couldn't have been her alone. She had to have had a co-conspirator. They didn't know who it was at first, but then through an interview with one of the surviving victims, another nurse was identified. Her name was Leonora Perez. She was also an ICU nurse. She also had recently immigrated from the Philippines. The surviving victim said that Leonora was in the room right before he had his respiratory attack. He also said that she didn't seem too concerned, didn't try to help him, and he remembered watching her walk away as he's having this attack.
Pretty vivid.
So the FBI has two suspects now. They have all of this circumstantial evidence, but based on that, they arrested both Filipina and Lenora on 10 counts of poisoning, 5 counts of murder, and 1 count of conspiracy. They're going to go to trial.
Yeah.
Both of these women. The problem for the prosecution is that things started to fall apart a little bit as they got closer to trial. For one thing, the only witness who named Filipina Narciso died prior to the start of the trial.
Yeah, it's rough when the only person that can say you were in my room is no longer there to say you were in my room. I mean, it has an impact, right? I mean, it's the only eyewitness they had.
Yeah, I was going to say it has an impact in the fact that you've lost your only eyewitness. And then the only witness who identified Leonora Perez turned out to be somewhat unreliable. The defense presented this person as an alcoholic as well as a racist. And Gibbs, to back up the racist point, apparently this witness called both defendants, quote, slant-eyed bitches.
That's never good.
That's not good.
And that will most likely discount your testimony.
Well, I think any good defense attorney is going to be able to use that to show the jury that, well, how can you listen to anything that this person has to say against my clients? At the very least, he's racist against people of Asian descent. At the very least.
At the very least.
If not, probably a whole bunch more people. This witness accused both women of acting as spies at the VA hospital for the sole purpose to kill veterans.
That's a pretty bold statement.
It is.
And it's also, I mean, you're not putting a whole lot of trust into the screening process the VA department would have used to place nurses in the facility.
Well, you would think as a juror, you have this witness that goes from being a person that says, I saw this, to a person that now is painted as a racist and is also saying that he believes these people are spies for a foreign government. I think for some people, some jurors, that would change their opinion of a witness, right? From being just a fact teller to being a racist and almost delving into the area of like conspiracy theories.
I mean, this definitely has an impact on his character.
So the prosecution had some circumstantial evidence. They had some witnesses that definitely had some character flaws. But in the end, the jury found both women guilty after 13 days of deliberation. That is a long time to deliberate.
It tells you they were tossing back and forth, weren't they?
The jury convicted both women of 3 counts of poisoning and conspiracy. Now, a lot of people, Gibbs, thought that this verdict was a rush to judgment against these 2 women because during the time of the trial, the country was experiencing a heavy influx of Asian immigrants into the country. There was a lot of sentiment against it, right? This is the late 70s. We're not that far removed from the end of the Vietnam War. It ended in 75, the same year that these murders happened. Now, the trial's happening in 1977. So there were some people that felt like this prosecution was in some way racially motivated. In July of 1977, the Philippine government made a statement regarding how they felt the nurses were unfairly found guilty. Also around this same time, it was reported that a VA hospital nurse supervisor took her own life right before the trial for these 2 nurses. So you had these rumors that began to emerge saying she left a note behind indicating that she was responsible for the murders. Now keep in mind, this was before the trial. The prosecution knew about this, but they did not share it with the defense.
Pretty important information to share.
I think it is.
I mean, it could lead to reasonable doubt.
So you had that. You had the racial issues as well that we mentioned. And it was about 7 months after the trial ended for these 2 nurses that their convictions were overturned and they were released. Filipina said after the dismissal of the charges, from the very beginning, I said I was innocent, and this proves it. Leonora said, it's over and I'm happy. So if you think about this, Gibbs, these charges had hung over the heads of these 2 women for over 2 years.
It's a long time.
It's a long time. If they were really innocent, that is a horrible thing.
Yeah, because you knew at this point, the press had already ruined their lives regardless.
Well, ruined their lives in a number of ways. Professionally, right? Who's going to hire these women as nurses with this type of cloud hanging over their head? Are you going to stay in the same place? Are you going to live in the same house when all of your neighbors know that this suspicion hangs over you. You were convicted. Yeah, it was overturned, but it's kind of like the whole newspaper rule, right? The conviction's on page 1. The dismissal or the retraction is on page 18.
Exactly.
Nobody knows.
Buried in a corner.
In stating the reason for the dismissal of the charges, it was said that there was no clear evidence of motive, which I think is important, right?
Yeah.
Why did these two women want to try to kill a number of people? Obviously, it wasn't monetary. They didn't stand to benefit from these people's deaths by getting any money. Now, some people just like to kill. We know that.
Exactly.
But I think what the state is saying in dismissing the charges is that they couldn't figure out what the motive was. Now, I think another thing that's important is at the time that the charges were dismissed, I said it was only 7 months, but a new prosecutor had come in. So not the same person that decided to take the case to trial. I don't think that this new prosecutor felt the same way about the case.
Fresh eyes, right?
Fresh eyes. I think he looked at it and said, I don't think this is something I would have taken to trial. And I think he said as much when laying out the reasons for the dismissal. He said the two nurses had no prior criminal or antisocial background. And he said to believe they did what they did, the two would have had to conspire together to carry out what he called a bizarre plan to poison patients. It's not out of the realm of possibility. He also mentioned that there was a heavy reliance on purely circumstantial testimony and some eyewitness testimony that we said was somewhat unreliable,
right,
and really didn't prove much of anything.
Life can be chaotic. If you're running a retail business, don't let disorganized order fulfillment add to the chaos. Use ShipStation instead. With ShipStation, you never have to worry about shipping and fulfillment again. Whether you're running a business out of your garage or you have multiple warehouses, ShipStation is ideal for every phase of your business's growth. Save time with one login for all your stores and by automating repetitive tasks. Plus, you'll save money with the best shipping rates from global carriers. ShipStation's industry-leading features help you deliver a better customer experience. They'll get accurate and faster shipments along with automated tracking updates with your branding. And with up to 88% off UPS and USPS rates and up to 90% off FedEx rates, ShipStation is the fastest and most affordable way to ship. Calm the chaos. Switch to ShipStation today. Start a free trial at shipstation.com/audio. That's shipstation.com/audio.
So I think Gibbs, to kind of summarize this, what he's saying is this is going to get torn to shreds. We're going to go ahead and file for dismissal. It's going to get overturned on appeal anyway, I think is what he believed.
Right.
I think it's rare, right, for a prosecutor or a prosecutor's office to voluntarily undo what they've done.
But that just tells you how bad of a case they had.
Well, yeah.
He confirmed it.
Exactly. Especially how bad he felt it was. And from there, that was it. They didn't want to make any further attempts to retry these nurses. I think for one reason, by that time, the public had come out against it. And I think they looked at the evidence and said, we just, yeah, they could get a conviction. You can get a conviction on a lot of different things.
Right.
Doesn't mean it's right. The case remains unsolved, depending on what you believe really happened. I mean, technically it's unsolved, but some people believe it was these two nurses and that they just decided that they were going to kill people. I think many people believe that they were railroaded into a conviction.
Sure.
Now, I think when you're talking about investigators, they still think it was these two women. I don't think they've deviated from that.
Yeah, I think they wish that you didn't have the immigration thing going on in the background, that wasn't in the public arena, that they just, if people could just focus in on.
Well, they probably wish they had a little bit more evidence. They wish that one of their main eyewitnesses hadn't come out and said a bunch of things that were racial.
Yeah.
racially insensitive. Now, there's a lot of people that believe this nurse supervisor really had something to do with it and that these two women kind of took the fall.
Yeah. I mean, I think if that nurse supervisor actually really did leave a note detailing her actions, I mean, why would you do that? If you didn't do it, why would you put it in the note and saying that you did?
Yeah. The problem is we don't know. We said it's a
Right.
rumor. It is one of those rumors that floats around. It is an interesting case. We have done some cases on True Crime All the Time about medical personnel that kill.
Right.
And again, what was the motive for that? Other than the fact that they wanted to kill, I don't know that there was one.
Yeah. I think they just got the thrill of being able to get away with it.
But that's the case of the attacks at the VA hospital. Now, next, we're going to talk about the unsolved murder of 18-year-old James Adamski. This is kind of timely, Gibbs, because it happened on Halloween in 1982. So it was October 30th. James Adamski was a high school senior at Depew High School, and he decided he was going to dress up for Halloween. It's 1982, so he chose to go as Richard Gere's American Gigolo character. The movie had not been out that long, probably. James left his house in the late evening to attend a Halloween Eve party at a local bar called the 5 and 23 in the town of Depew. James got to the bar. He paid the door fee of what some of the reports say was $12. It's a pretty good amount in 1982.
Well, it got you unlimited drinks.
Well, that's the thing. I still think that's kind of pricey because I was in college in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And for $5, you could get all you could drink.
Really?
Oh, yeah. But that was college.
That was college. Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, even at $12, unlimited drinks, I'm thinking, not a bad deal.
For you, they're going to lose a lot of money.
Yeah, I'm going to win that battle.
But I think, what's important to talk about is it is 1982. You only had to be 18 years old to drink back then. I missed that window.
I did not.
You did not. You were drinking at the age of 18.
Oh, yeah. I mean, oh, yes, I was.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I was too, just not legally.
Yeah, I say
that was the big difference.
Yeah, I probably started drinking earlier than that,
Yeah.
illegally. But yeah, legally, yes, I could walk in somewhere and be served.
I don't remember what year they changed it, but obviously it was before I turned 18 in 90 or 91. I think it was the late 80s sometime.
Yeah.
Is when they changed it.
I'm surprised you didn't make a joke about me being the freshman in high school that was buying beer and stuff for everybody, even though I was much higher in my education at that point. But I just thought for sure you'd go in low like that.
Well, I mean, by the age of 18, you were already into your graduate doctoral program, right?
Oh, yeah, that's true. There you go. I like how you, yes.
See? I reversed it.
Yes, you did.
I didn't give you a hard time.
No.
I gave you the Doogie Howser credit that you deserve.
Me and Doogie had a good time at college together.
So James Adamski stayed at the bar until he closed. He closed it down.
Many nights doing that.
I have done that many times myself. He was last seen walking up Transit Road close to Broadway. This is around 3:30 a.m. on Halloween morning. He was only about 2 miles away from his home. There are some reports that say he was trying to hitch a ride, which we know. Late 70s, 80s, that was a very common thing to do.
If only all these people knew how bad hitchhiking was.
Well, if I could do a Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure,
Yeah.
I would go back to the 70s and start a campaign that says, do not hitchhike.
If you could do a Bill and Ted's Adventure, you would go back and become the guy that invented the computer.
Or Steve Jobs.
Or Steve Jobs. Yeah. I'd be the guy that invented Amazon. I don't know his name.
Jeff Bezos.
Is that his name? Yeah. I'd be him. He's got to be worth billions.
Oh, yeah. Many, many. So we know that James was last seen around 3:30 a.m. We also know that he never made it home that morning. His mother realized that he didn't come home, and she knew right away, Gibbs, that something was wrong. I think mothers know, Right?
I think so too.
You and I have talked about that before. Mother's intuition. I mean, I don't even know if I'd call it intuition. You know your son. He's a person that always comes home. You're expecting him home.
Right.
For him to not be home and to not have called, you're naturally thinking something is wrong. And I think she later came out and said, James was a kid that would have called her to let her know, number one, why he wasn't coming home, where he was going to be staying that night. So his mom called the police to report him missing. The local police, along with the fire department, searched for James, but they had no idea where he was. They didn't find him during any of their searches. It wasn't until almost 2 months later, on the day after Christmas, the 26th, that a couple of hunters, they were hunting rabbits on a cold, snowy day in the wooded area off Ransom Road. This was about 5 miles from the last place that James was seen walking home early that Halloween morning. In those woods, the hunters stumbled across a dead body laying under a pile of leaves and twigs in a very shallow gravesite. Police identified the body the next day as James Adamski. Police stated that James still had on his Halloween costume. He had been beaten to death by blows to the head with some type of blunt object.
Yeah, they were thinking it could have been a baseball bat, a 2x4, maybe a tire iron. They weren't sure exactly what it was, but it had that type of effect on his skull.
Well, unfortunately, there are a lot of items that kind of fall into that category, right? That can be, they're not considered weapons, but they can be used to kill someone. I mean, you hit somebody on the head hard enough with a baseball bat, a tire iron, or even like you said, a 2x4, you can do some real damage, including killing someone.
Absolutely.
James had multiple blows to his forehead. Police thought that it was most likely that he was killed somewhere else, then brought to the field and left there.
Police also said that this area where he was found, somebody had to be pretty familiar with it. It just wasn't some place you would stumble upon. You would know about where this was and how to get back to it fairly easily. Yeah,
it's not like you're going to pull your car or truck off the side of the road and just, stumble out into the field. Like you said, this was an area that somebody had to have some type of knowledge of. Police also said that the killer tried to hide his body. We said he was buried in a shallow grave. It was hand dug, and James was covered with a bunch of twigs. And investigators said that, the killer had to most likely gather up these twigs because it was like they were snapped into a certain length and then used to cover up the body. They theorized that the killer must have worn gloves because they couldn't recover any fingerprints. Although this does seem like a crime scene to me, Gibbs, where it would be very difficult to pull fingerprints. I'm not sure how easy it is to pull a fingerprint off of a twig. The report said that they tried, so It must be possible.
This was also wintertime, cold out. Maybe the killer or just had gloves on to stay warm.
Oh, you're thinking not so much to not leave fingerprints. It's just so cold out that it made sense to wear gloves. That could be.
Yeah.
The police shifted from a missing persons investigation to a murder investigation. They interviewed James's family. They interviewed his friends, former girlfriends. They interviewed the people that were at the party he was at the night before. But you have to think of the size of this police force. This was probably not something that they were very accustomed to, investigating this type of murder. They called the state police in to assist.
Well, good for them to recognize that this is not their specialty. They don't have the knowledge base or just the resources to pursue it.
Yeah, it could have been any number of things like that. But I agree with you because I think sometimes there is the idea that police have where they don't want any help. They want to do it all on their own, whether they have the knowledge or the experience. And again, maybe today more police agencies have it we're talking about 1982.
Right.
It says something, though, that they were willing to call the state police in to assist. The state police determined that James was really just a pretty good guy. They couldn't find that he had any real beefs with anybody else, no real enemies, didn't have jilted girlfriends who were upset about how the relationship ended. Now, the one thing they did learn is that James drank a lot at that party.
That's why you pay that door price when you walked in.
He was going to get his $12 worth for sure. During the last few hours at the bar, James and some other people began to get into some disagreements. There were some verbal arguments that happened. Investigators looked into it, right? Because you could definitely have a motive based off that. They really had a hard time getting detailed information on these disagreements, who they were with. But eventually, I think they figured out that, no, this wasn't as big a deal as maybe they thought it was at first.
Probably just some drunk individuals, mouthing off to each other maybe for a little bit, and then things settle down.
Isn't that what drunk individuals do?
That's what, yes.
They become bulletproof.
They do.
And that's what alcohol does.
Yeah.
And then you think you're 10 feet tall and you can stand up to anyone. Police chased down every lead, but they had no luck. They even looked into one lead that led them to a cabbage farmer in the next county. And I think initially they looked at this individual pretty hard as a person of interest, but as the investigation unfolded, they felt like it wasn't him. So really, when you look at this case, Gibbs, what do they have in the way of evidence, in the way of knowledge? Not very much.
Pretty limited.
Right? They know when James left the bar. They know when the last time it was he was seen. They theorize that at some point he did get into a car, right? He got picked up as a hitchhiker, and it was most likely whoever picked him up that struck him in the head at some point, either in the car or somewhere later.
Right.
And then left his body in the woods.
Yeah, it's a really tough timeline to do anything else with. I mean, it's just what happened between the time he allegedly got picked up and when the body was found.
Yeah. If he got picked up at all.
Exactly.
These cases are extremely tough because there's just not that much information to go on. It's not like people are coming forward saying, I saw this, I saw that. There's just really a couple of pieces of information, and then everything else is speculation. Now, it's based on the information they have. They can speculate as to what happened, but the state police have said that they're surprised at how little good evidence they've been able to come up with. Very few leads have resulted from their investigative work. But Gibbs, they do have the costume, the clothing that James wore that night, and they've processed it for DNA over the years. Obviously, they didn't do that in 1982.
Right.
They continue to search databases, my understanding, looking for DNA hits.
Well, and maybe one day, maybe they'll get that.
Yeah, the possibility definitely exists if they have the DNA. And that's assuming that the DNA is from the killer, right? We don't know.
Well, that's true. Could have been someone or many people at the bar that night.
At the bar, right? There's transfer. There's all kinds of stuff that happens. But the one thing the police have said is that they truly believe there's someone out there that knows more than what they've said so far. And they're hoping that whoever that is that knows more will come forward to help shed some light on the disappearance and murder of James Adamski. James had a younger brother. He was 10 years younger than James. His name's Andy. And Andy Adamski remembers his brother leaving that night all dressed up to go to the bar for the Halloween party. He said his brother kissed him on the forehead and told him to have fun while he was out trick-or-treating.
For an 8-year-old to remember that, it's probably had a pretty big impact.
My assumption is Gibbs, 8-year-old with an 18-year-old brother, he probably idolized his older brother, wanted to be just like him, followed him around, wanted to follow in his footsteps. Andy has said that he'll never forget that night, and he won't rest until his brother's murder is solved. James had 2 other siblings as well, and Andy has said that his siblings, Larry and Susan, feel the exact same way. They're never going to give up on trying to figure out what happened to their brother James, and they want to see whoever did this to their brother held responsible.
Absolutely. You're going to want to keep making efforts every day, every year until it's resolved.
They remember James as a great guy. They said he loved life. He was into art. He just liked being around his friends and family. Their dad passed away in 2000. Their mom passed away in 2005.
Man, never getting to know who did this to their kid.
Yeah. We talk about that in a lot of unsolved cases. It's very sad. Lived out the remaining days of their lives, Gibbs, every day, wondering what really happened to our son and why has no one been held accountable for what they did.
Right.
So the siblings have all come out and talked about how overprotective their mom was after James's murder. And I think that's only natural.
Sure it is. And I know we've done other unsolved cases and solved cases where siblings are involved, and they've said similar, right? Their mom or their dad puts restrictions on them.
Yeah. They said they were never allowed to go out after dark. You know, you just hunker down. I think as a mom at that point, you're just trying to do whatever you have to do to keep your kids safe. So obviously this is an unsolved case, but like we said, the family's never going to give up, and the police are not going to give up. They're running DNA. They're trying to get a hit. And hopefully, like you said, Gibbs, someday in the near future, they will. And we can consider this case solved. We'll actually find out who killed James Adamski.
So I think in this case, our best hopes are based on the DNA eventually coming through and identifying somebody.
Yeah, I agree. But, you know, in a lot of these unsolved cases, we're pinning our hopes, a lot of them, on these advances in DNA technology. So 2 different cases in this episode, both unsolved, but very different cases, right? The first case, there were a couple of suspects tried, convicted, then the charges were later dismissed. A lot of people feel that this nurse supervisor may have had some involvement in the case. Then the second case, the case of James Adamski, totally different.
Yeah.
Much less information.
No suspect.
No suspects. Much less in the way of actual evidence, eyewitnesses, things like that. But I think one thing to consider is that these are both fairly old cases, right? 75 and 82. And I hate to say it, but I think it's true. The older these cases get, the less likely they are to be solved. Now, I do think DNA is changing that somewhat.
Sure.
I mean, you can look at the East Area Rapist. You can look at a number of cases that date back, you know, pretty far that they've solved. And it's amazing. But that's it for the cases of the VA hospital deaths and the case of James Adamski. Got some voicemails, Gibbs. You want to listen to those?
Let's hear them.
Hey Mike, this is Meg from England, one of your proud and happy Patreon supporters. I wanted to call and thank you for all the hard work you both do for this show. It's so well put together, and I appreciate you focusing on and bringing attention to these smaller cases. They may be smaller in terms of media, but they aren't smaller for the family and friends affected, so thank you. Thanks for everything you do and sharing your great friendship with all of us. So from me, a paid-up member of Team TCAT, stay safe and keep your own time ticking. P.S. Does anyone else write down their voicemails and practice them before calling in? Bye.
It's funny that she said that at the end. I was like, man, she really has that going on. That's a very coherent, no ums, which is hard to do.
Very hard to do.
You know, when you're just talking in everyday life, there's going to be some ums. There's going to be some blunders, some things. So, but we appreciate the kudos. We really do. And we appreciate the support on Patreon. And as far as the lesser known cases, Gibbs, you and I really enjoy doing them for a number of different reasons. One, we like for people to hear about cases that maybe they haven't heard on some of the other podcasts that they listen. That's getting harder to do as there are more and more true crime podcasts out there. But also, like she said, I do think it's good to shed light on some of these lesser known cases.
Yeah. I enjoy them. I actually do. I enjoy them a lot.
I do too.
Hi, my name's Crystal. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I was just calling. I don't want to be petty, but I just recently started listening to your podcast, specifically the Unsolved episode, and it was bothering me in the Allegheny Murders episode. You were pronouncing one of the town's names wrong. It's not Olean, it's Olean. So just a little, little education on that. My sister was actually born in Olean, New York. So I just thought I would let you guys know in case you ever happen to come across that town again. Thank you so much. I'm enjoying listening to the podcast, and I look forward to listening to more. Bye.
That's the voicemail I was referencing earlier.
Right.
We love to be educated. Now, what I will say is I probably got 100 emails about Olean. The other thing I will say is I got at least 3 different ways to pronounce it.
You did too. It was funny.
So that's the thing. Obviously, I know it's not Olean, but I got people saying it's pronounced 3 different ways. So people that even believe they know how to pronounce it, somebody's right and somebody's wrong.
Yeah. Can't all be saying it the right way.
I do believe it's Olean.
And that's where we'll leave it.
But I had people saying it's Olean. I forget what the other one was. There was 3 different ways. I remember that.
Hey guys, this is Catherine Richardson. I'm calling from Oklahoma City, and I've listened to TCAT for a while and just getting to the Unsolved episodes. And I just listened to the Dardine family murders. And I was wondering if you guys had thought maybe it could be a woman. It sounds like, the cutting off of the genitals might be more of a female thing to do, especially a jealous female might, kill the family, the person that this man loves, and then any child that he might have fathered. It sounds just more like a female than murder, and I'm not sure if anybody had considered that, but I would love to know your take. And I love your podcast, and I will be donating. Thank you so much. Bye.
If I was her husband right now, I'd be scared.
You'd be scared to death to fall asleep.
Mm-hmm.
So, to be honest with you, Dardine family murders has been quite a while ago.
Right.
And I don't remember what episode number that was. The problem you and I have, Gibbs, is that some of the slate gets wiped clean. It's kind of like recording over an old VCR tape over and over and over. There might be some remnants there.
Right.
But the entire facts of the case are not always at our disposal.
Yeah.
Because it's hard when you're researching so many different cases.
I do know that we talked about potential jealousy of a lover.
And I definitely think it could be female. There's no reason why it would have to be a male. I think either sex can cut off somebody's wee willy winker equally as well.
Yeah.
Some women are very adept with a knife. As you well know, you've been attacked multiple times. I've heard the stories.
It's kind of scary.
You've had to fend them off Jason Bourne style with your hidden tiger crouching dragon. Is that the style you use? I forget. What do you up to?
I just
now?
call them skills.
Oh, just skills. But definitely possible. No doubt.
Hello, Mike and Gibby. I just wanted to call and say, listen to your podcast all the time while I'm at work, and sometimes when I get home from work, if I am too interested in what you got going on. I wanted to say, please look into the case of Noah DeWitt. He was one of my friends in college, and he died mysteriously and wound up in a storm drain. Nobody knows what's going on. I'm neither Team Mike nor Team Gibby. Keep time ticking. Boom.
Well, hey.
Boom goes the dynamite.
Appreciate that voicemail.
I do too. So another case that we need to write down for Unsolved.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Gibbs, that's it. That's it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
And Gibby.
Stay safe and keep your own time ticking.